It is time once again for the Mr. Irrelevant podcast. Josh Lewin with you. Very glad you decided to join. Appreciate it as always. Alan Brown is joining as well. And, you know, the whole spirit of this podcast, if you don't know, anyone who's ever had any measure of self-doubt or told they weren't going to succeed in their chosen space, it's tough to overcome those voices sometimes, whether they're coming from outside or maybe it's people who at one point deem themselves to be irrelevant in some way. Sometimes I guess it has to be a life-changing event that makes you think, I got nothing. Where do I go from here? And that's why Alan Brown is such a great guest in this space. He's gone from irrelevant to completely inspirational. I don't think inspirational even does that justice. But Alan, thank you so much for joining. I'm going to tell a very, very small bit of who you have become. A longtime Miami and New York City PR executive, in the radio business for a while, in the agent world a while, in the sports world for forever. Now the director of new partnerships at a very important place, Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. So I don't want to put words in your mouth. You've told your own story 100,000 times, but please take me back if you would. You're 20 years old, 1988. You're at a Club Med. It seems like your life is going pretty well at that point. So pick up the thread if you wouldn't mind.
And I'm just going to jump in on the intro. So thank you for that, by the way.
Sure.
Inspiration is a word that I actually don't really love because, when your back is up against the wall, people say, how do you do this? I have no choice. You have to figure out how to come out and fight. And I appreciate that I inspire people, but I'm doing just what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I kind of look at that from that standpoint. My story actually starts before that. I grew up in New York City. I'm a city kid. In 1985, I graduated high school, and my best friend Danny was in a car accident that summer where he was in summer camp, and the car flipped over, and he became a paraplegic. So that was my first, entree into the paralysis world. My grandfather, as a kid, had a stroke, so I kind of knew a little bit of the struggle. So I always kind of felt that. But that just hit me hard when an 18-year-old boy, who's my friend, he was getting ready to go to Syracuse University, became hurt. And I felt like I needed to help. So I did. I became a little bit of his caregiver, would take him out and do stuff and visit him in the hospital a lot. And then in 1987, on the Upper West Side in New York City, I threw a fundraiser on like the weekend, the Thursday night before, or the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving when everybody's home. And we did a fundraiser for Danny's foundation. We raised $25,000 for research for spinal cord injury. That money was earmarked for the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis, which was Mark Bonacani and Nick Bonacani and Dr. Barth Green. I sent them a check. Then I went on vacation after the holiday season to Club Med, and I was there, and I was on vacation, and there were 3 buses that went to the beach. 2 buses were told, do not go in the water. My bus was not told that. I was in the water, as a 20-year-old kid, and the water looked great. It looked a little bit rough, but I went in, and it was definitely rough. And while I was in the water, there was a girl next to me, and I remember grabbing her by the hips and passing her out to her parents to get out because she couldn't get out over the break of the waves. And I passed her out, and the next thing I know, I heard my neck snap. I got hit by a wave. My head hit the ocean floor, and I broke C5 and C6 in my neck. The ironic thing is that, I was under the water for a couple of minutes. I saw my whole life flashing in front of me. I was swallowing the water as quickly as I could at a certain point when I couldn't breathe anymore because I said goodbye. And I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt anybody to really suffer from, the grief that was going to come. I started to drink the water really quickly. The world, I saw, they say you see the light. I've seen it. It was very, light and calm, and my light flashed in front of me. And then 3 individuals pulled me out of the water. My friend Gil, who I was on vacation with, my friend David, and ironically, the 3rd person was Adam Schefter. The girl who I passed off was Adam's sister, Marnie, to his parents. So it just happened to be that. Adam and I reconnected years later, and I was lying on the beach, and I was in control from the very beginning, to be honest with you. I remember cracking jokes from Fletch. I remember lying on the beach after they pulled me out, and I'm like, don't worry, guys, it's all ball bearings. After I got myself settled and, Dr. Rosen and this and that, I was like trying to keep everybody calm. And I guess that's kind of my nature, is always being who I was. And I knew that I had to fight up against me, but I was always up for a challenge. And not that this is the challenge that I wanted, but I really had no choice. Growing up as a kid, I had a little bit, dyslexia and a little bit of ADD, which they didn't know that back in the day. I'm 59 years old. And, it was difficult for me to even get through high school. But I was an athlete. I was a hockey player and always kind of balanced the two to figure out how to get through. And I was working at Studio 54 and, throwing parties and having fun when I was a teenager growing up. So I grew up very quickly and I kind of had that in me and always learned to give back. And I kind of said when this happened to me, I'm not saying why, I'm going to say what. What do I need to do to help not just me, but others? And that's kind of become what I did. And we started a foundation that bared my name for a long time. And we did raise millions of dollars in golf tournaments with celebrities from John Van Beesbrook to Billie Jean King to, everybody's been honored by me over the 37 years I've been throwing golf tournaments. This year we're honoring Chip McCarthy. He is one of the founders and managing directors at the IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. Unfortunately, he was in a biking accident 9.5 years ago, and he became a quadriplegic, and him and I become pretty close, and we're honoring him at Wingfoot August 17th this year. So, I kind of taken this journey as just moving forward, letting things roll off me, helping people. I want to touch as many lives as I can. And I live in pain. I live with a little bit of struggle here and there. Life's not easy, but I try to make it work. And I guess it helped many people the way. I do start my day every morning swimming between a half a mile and a mile. And that kind of gets me set for my day. So
yeah, and when you start those days, Alan, I mean, I don't want to make too much of this if that's the right phrasing even, but do you begin days not only with a swim, but with some sort of methodology in your head, some sort of affirmation, something that pushes you forward?
Yes, I did. And that actually came from a friendship and a relationship with Tony Robbins, to be honest with you. He had me come and do one of his crazy 5 days with him up there. And this mantra that I got into my head, every stroke that I swim is a different word that comes out. I am courage. I am determined. I am grateful. I am worthy. Today I added a word. I will win. So there's reasons for things. But those words are in my head and a positive, negative out. I try to stay as clear as I can in that moment. Sometimes things get into my head, but when they do, I just stroke harder and talk louder into my head to push out the noise. And I'll be in the pool for a half hour to an hour straight, just cranking it out and clearing my head and doing that.
Is part of why you bond, do you think, with the Billie Jean Kings and the John Van Beesbrooks and all these very famous people? These mantras, it seems like they have put those into play. A lot of famous people, successful people kind of live that anyway, right?
Totally. Speaking to Billy a couple last week and so on, how do we win? How do we do things? How to, from the very beginning, it was always, we sponsored her team tennis back in 1990, and I got to spend time with her. And I always said to her from the very beginning when I met her, what you have done for women is what I want to do for people with disabilities. And that's how her and I bonded from that standpoint. John Van Beek, timing. With me, timing is everything, by the way. Like meeting these people, getting in. Like I happen to be, sometimes I'm in the wrong, when this happened to me, I was in the wrong place at the right time. That's kind of the way I look at it in a strange way. But I just have weird things that happen to me. Like John Van Beesbrook, he was hurt that one season after my accident, and he happened to be sitting in the corner of Madison Square Garden with Chris Nyland, and they're like, "What happened to you?" And I used to go out drinking with those guys before my accident. So like they used to be in the city, like players used to live in the city that they used to play in. They used to be part of the neighborhoods. So like I knew these guys, and they knew what happened to me and whatever, and then they were like, "Well, let's throw a golf tournament," and that started. So and then whether it's thank God I get to be in these places, and from my in the sports world, I put Bill Parcells, Buddy Ryan, Joe Gibbs, Dan Henning, Art Shell, Chuck Knox, all of them on Slim Fast in 1990, losing weight. And what we were doing for every pound they lost, we were giving $500 to spinal cord research. So I was figuring out how to kind of weave sports into my world because I always wanted to win. I always wanted to, I was an athlete. I wanted to win the Stanley Cup. That's what I wanted. I ended up getting a World Series ring for the Marlins in '97 because I did community relations, which was giving back. At that
Yeah.
point is how do you get back. So it's always kind of been in my way of trying to figure it out. Even when we started, the 790 The Ticket, the sports radio station down here, there was always figuring out charity components to kind of help the community and get involved. And that's what we need as individuals living with paralysis. From the standpoint, we can't do everything alone, and people shouldn't be afraid to reach out. And when you feel that your back is up against the wall, which is, irrelevant, it's very common to come into your head. But you need to figure out how to stay positive and keep moving forward.
Do you ever find yourself, even now, so many years later, after this life-changing moment, playing the what if game? You mentioned the buses. What if you had been on one of the two buses that heeded a warning? What if you had gone to a different Club Med? What if you gone to Jamaica instead of Martinique? You never do that?
Never think. No, doesn't cross my head. The what ifs are as I'm aging. I have two beautiful kids, 28 and 28 and 23. And, I know a lot of people, thank God I'm not alone, but I am divorced. And like now, as I'm getting older, I don't come as a one. I come as a 1.5 because I need help. I need a caregiver. So it's really hard, like in relationships and things along those lines, of how do you not be alone, but also work into what is healthy, for people. And when you're dating somebody, a lot of times when people get hurt and I get these new phone calls, the system forces people for your wife or somebody to become your caregiver. That's not healthy. That's gonna always keep pulling you back. And, that's where through like the foundation, we have our resource center, our National Paralysis Resource Center, and we help people all the time. And we see these come in and, we just had our summit up in Boston last week. And one of the most powerful things that we had was the caregiving. People talking about they want to move forward in life, but the caregiving is a hard part of it. So how do you balance caregiving and relationships and children and things along those lines? And it's a lot, and it could make anybody fall back. Mm-hmm. And it does. I always say, when you see me, it looks great. You have no idea what took me to get here.
Right.
So,
when you talk about caregiving, I'm really interested in this because the subject of this podcast, this whole series, this whole movement is relevance. And what do you do when you feel those seeds of self-doubt starting to sprout a little bit? Do you think caregivers, some of them anyway, in a weird way, find a relevance and maybe kind of a need, right? I mean, because now all of a sudden, without this is not going to be easy for you.
Yeah, I mean, like I've had a caregiver at one point for 19 years straight for 6 days in a row in the mornings, and they become part of your family, and you hope that your energy, there's got to be that energy that plays off of it. You just don't want somebody coming in and being like, blah, 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 whatever. But I also don't want somebody coming in 7 o'clock in the morning and having crazy conversations all day long. Like, I want to get up, I want to get in the pool, I want to get myself ready, I want to shower, I want to, whatever, and I want to get going. So it has to, you have to be able to play with it and make it work. And then that goes into travel and things along those lines. But, but it's just another relationship that you have to kind of manage. Not easy, but you have to manage it.
And obviously, I think one of the things that...
just so everybody knows who's listening, I can't tie my own shoe. I can't button my own pants.
Got it, yeah. No, I mean, and that is helpful to know.
So when you hear about it, I can swim, I can drive, I can jump out of airplanes, I can do all that stuff, everything along those lines. It's the little fine motor dexterity things that holds me back from being completely independent.
Got it. And when you meet some of these other people that have had similar misfortune happen to them, and again, I bristle at using the word misfortune because you've turned this into a personal cause celeb and beyond. I mean, this is so motivating and so helpful and instructive to so many people. But when you find someone else who is in this space, and I'm thinking of a guy like Eric LeGrand at Rutgers, he had the C3, C4 spinal cord injury, happened at the Meadowlands playing for Rutgers. And this was a fairly anonymous college football player until the event. So do you bond with guys like that over things like that?
Big time. So just to give you like how that whole thing played out, Bruce Beck was calling the game at Rutgers that day. The hit happened, and I was within 5 minutes. I had a text message The second Bruce was able to get to a phone, I got a phone call. Later that evening, I got in touch with Tim Pernetti, who was the AD of the school at the time. He was up at the hospital at Hackensack Hospital, and he was getting bombarded. And I said, "You have no idea who I am." And I kind of told him everything. And we got through it. My name is Alan Brown, and da da da. And I'm here to help. And we got through it all. And he's in a whirlwind dealing with families and media and everything along those lines. And I got him into a calmer place. And I said, "I'm here to help you," and da da da, so on and so forth. So that became the beginning of a relationship where I knew I needed to get to Eric at some point in time. He was up in New Jersey, I was in Florida, and wasn't breathing. I mean, there was a lot going on. But once we got together, I remember the first time I went to visit him at the hospital, we bonded. Like, it was a bond, and he called me Mr. Brown, and I'm like, "My name is Alan," and, his mom was around, and I had to deal with his mom, and, telling him and this and that, and da da da, and watching it all. And then the second his mom walks away, I turn and I look at him and I go, "All right, so you want to talk about the important stuff?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" And I go, "Women." And at that point in time, he was like, "What?" And I go, "I'm sure you're curious, right? You're 20 years old, whatever." And, at that point, he became like my best friend. Like, we became brothers at that point in time. And it was no more, it was Alan. It changed. Our whole demeanor changed. And then I have been there, and I will always be there for him, a phone call away from everything that him and his mom need. I helped them get him set up. He became Eric LeGrand, the team LeGrand of the Christopher and then a Reeve Foundation. There was at one point in time, I've been at the Reeve Foundation for 15 years. I became very friendly with Christopher after his accident. We used to go to Ranger games together and stuff along those lines. And then I was a board member. And then after he passed, I became an employee, and I've been there for 15 years. I've seen what's happened where somebody like an Eric with that notoriety, they go out on their own, and they don't have the support of the back end of what Reeve is, our resource center. When those phone calls come in, you can't handle them all by yourself. You can't give them the answers. You can't give them the peer mentoring, the advocacy, the information that we have. And we gave that, I and the foundation gave it to Eric and his family and to the whole Rutgers community. And now we have the Walk to Believe, which happens every year at Rutgers, where the entire stadium is raising money for the Reeve Foundation through Team LeGrand. So there's certain people that you look at when they get hurt. The person in the family come first. But down the road, you have to think about the cause and what makes sense. And that's when my sports marketing brain comes into play, and my brash New Yorkness to kind of get things done.
Is there one thing more than any other that a guy like Eric needs to hear or needs to know right away that's cookie cutter enough? I mean, you mentioned you were able to find the common ground with, hey, what's going to be like with women, whatever. But is there one overriding thing that you just will always lead with because this is the important thing to know?
First of all, I'm much better talking to guys than I am talking to girls. I have a sidekick, a friend of mine, Sabrina, who, if it's a woman that calls, I usually pass them off to her. Just FYI, like, that's just different plumbing, different things along those lines, different things you got to talk about. With guys, you go in, you don't know what you're going in for. So I go in with the same thing all the time, in all honesty, is, hey, I'm here for you. That's one thing. I've been living this for a very long time. I'm going to figure out how to help your family. Communicate. Back in the day when I got hurt, I have these two little holes on my head. You can see them. I was wearing a halo, and I had my accident for 4.5 months. All I was able to do was look straight and look up. But I rang up a phone bill in the hospital of about $1,200 because I wanted to communicate. Now with technology these days, it's a little bit different. So I'll show up in a hospital room with a National Paralysis Resource Guide from the Christopher Reeve Foundation, some Velcro, an extension cord, and a Bluetooth earpiece. So that individual, in their lying there all that time thinking about the heartache and everything going on, they can communicate. I couldn't communicate really when I was in the ICU 38 years ago. That wasn't happening. There was a lot of darkness. There was a lot of, my days became nights, my nights became days, but it's because that's ICU psychosis. So just really letting people know that not everything is the same. Everybody has different stuff of how they handle things, but communicate, and I'm here to help figure out how to get you through. I'm not going to guarantee it's going to be right, but I'll give you a pretty good roadmap of trying to make your life better so you can have a quality life. And it's not just you. When Eric got hurt, you look at a pebble in a lake. He was the rock that hit. Look at all everything that came around that the waves around that little rock. That's everybody else that was affected. So you can't just look at Eric because Eric is probably better. I say this about me, my mom, and it's all the time. My mom got hurt worse than I did on January 2nd, 1988, and that's really tough to watch. So I worry about my mom more than I worry about myself.
Was there an element of that? I'm guessing there had to be with Christopher Reeve, and I'm going to use you to help us get to know him in absentia. You had the blessing to work alongside of him. You've already mentioned a couple things that lead us to know something about his personality. But what was the secret sauce with Christopher? Why was he so good at connecting like that?
He scared me, to be honest with you. I mean, he was so intense. You just saw the fire in his eyes of that he needed to do something and wanted to do something, and I felt it. I just felt it. Like I felt the energy from Dana as well. I got to spend time with both of them, and him and I would have our calls. And when you listened to him and you spoke to him, even between the ventilator breaths and stuff along those lines, it just sunk in me of this needs to be done and we need to do this and how does this happen, and how do we take care of, and those conversations were amazing. And I just, I keep him really close to me. I was talking to Will about this the other day. When I met Will the first time, he was 5 or 6 years old, and he would stand on my footplate of my wheelchair so we can see over the boards of the garden when Messier would come over and knock on the boards for us. So we go way back, but really Christopher he was one of a kind, and he was gentle but yet fierce, and focused and determined. And I have a little of that, and I am no Superman, but if I can carry that torch for our community, which he was carrying, bring it, because just bring it, because that's what I'm here to do.
How important is it to Alan? I mean, I'm guessing at some point you've seen or heard the musical Dear Evan Hansen, and the whole treatise of "You Are Not Alone" to me resonates bigger and better than any other piece of music in that incredible show. How much is that "You Are Not Alone," that messaging, important in this community?
Huge, huge, because it could be the smallest thing that happens where you just say, why me? I can't believe this, whether it's your shoe falls off or you have a flat tire or you can't get transportation or the hotel room is wrong. There's no shower you can use. So there's always something that's going to go on. And if you don't talk to your people or communicate, it just becomes a black hole that you're stuck in. So we're not alone. You choose to be alone if you want to be alone. If you go out and put a smile on your face and say hello to people, good things will come to you. And if you're out there with a negative face and you have a puss on, you're going to be alone. And I'd rather go out there and, I noticed the other day just going to get my driver's license or my ID redone. I was nice to the person in there, and you can just tell that going in there with a smile on the face of the DMV, where the guy said thank you to me, he was like, wow, you communicated with me, you were nice, and that. Yeah, and I'm like, I appreciate it. He's like, really, you have a blessed day. And you just know that and I thought about it that day. It really hit me from the standpoint of okay, that was a connection, and hopefully, that was a good thing for that guy. So
I got a personal one before we wrap up. We got 5 more minutes, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. You participate in things like marathons. You go skydiving and scuba diving. I'm just curious, how much of that is for you, Alan Brown? How much of that is to be inspirational and put that on that palette that people can paint from?
So I'm a little bit of a risk taker. So I definitely, I remember growing up in New York City, watching the marathon in Central Park before it hit the streets of New York. I'd always wanted to do that as a little kid. So that was in me from day one when I got hurt, that I wanted to do a marathon. I'm not doing marathons anymore. My shoulders are shot. My lower back is banged up. But when I did it, yes, it was for me, definitely was for me, but it was also a statement of a how do we raise money around this? When I did my, one of my marathons, I raised over $300,000 because I raised $10,000 per mile, and I exceeded that. When I did, that was that was the most recent ones that I've done. But like back in the day, it was for me because I had that energy. Like I couldn't play hockey anymore. I couldn't go bang anybody up in the corners. I needed to fight myself on the streets of New York with me able to do that. Same thing, skydiving is a quick adrenaline rush, so that was a good thing for me. So I could use that. But in every story, there's a story. When I did the New York City Marathon, I was stopped because they started me so early, which led to a class action lawsuit where we ended up suing the New York City Roadrunners Club, and now there's a wheelchair division. So out of all my struggles and all my everything along those lines and breaking my wrist during the race and still finishing and things along those lines, because I had a bet with a Beezer, that was the reason I finished with a broken wrist. There was always the competitiveness of having to prove myself. And I would use that to stay relevant. Being out in Central Park in the afternoons when everybody else was rollerblading, I wasn't at home. That's what people did after work. And I would be there. I would just be there in my chair, pushing around the park 6 miles, and I would outdo my friends. So a lot of it was for me because I need to keep my head sharp. But a lot of it is also a statement for others to move forward and not be afraid to. Not to be afraid to move forward and help others along the way.
I may regret trying to get philosophical on you, but I'm going to channel my inner Nietzsche here because he had the whole out of chaos comes order. Out of irrelevance comes relevance. Is that possible? Because here's the universe telling you in Martinique at Club Med, you're going to be irrelevant, Alan Brown. You're not going to be able to walk again. There's a million things you're not going to be able to do. You are irrelevant. And out of that comes this incredible relevance and importance. So I don't know what the universe is trying to do here, but you became supremely relevant because of something you never asked for.
I think that's just from the upstairs of how the world works and things happen. And don't ever doubt me. Don't ever bet against me. If you feel that you're in trouble, I'm here to try to help and figure it out. But I always, like I said, like growing up as a kid and being in the neighborhoods of New York, you had to always fight to be in front. And I just still keep the same thing, whether I'm able-bodied or not able-bodied, is I'm a people person. I like people. I enjoy life. I got dealt a card that was a little bit different than everybody else's, but I like the way I'm playing it. And I hope people can learn from that. And nothing is ever going to be perfect, but don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to talk to people. They don't have to be people that you pay to go listen to. You can find friends, but reach out and find the right people and don't be alone. It's not a good place.
Which leads us to the conclusion, which is I want to be able to let you wave the banner for the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation just for a hot minute here before we take off. If people want to get in touch, need to get in touch, or just want to find out more information, where are you sending them? What do they do?
So they should just go to reeve.org, reeve.org. You can really see everything on there. We're about today's care and tomorrow's cure, taking care of the people in the here and the now while we look for treatments. And there's treatments out there that are being approved right now by the FDA that are getting people better function. And I have gotten some back myself. With regards to the care part of it all, we have quality of life grants that we give out, over $50 million in grants we've given out to other non-for-profits. So if you go onto our website, you can look at your zip code in there and see what grants we've given out. So you can go and do adaptive cycling and swimming and biking and skydiving and horseback riding and the arts. That's all out there for you that we are doing. At that same time, if you get hurt, military, veteran, we have an MVP program, the Military and Veterans Program. The vets don't realize that they have a lot of rights for them when they get hurt, and they don't have to be paralyzed from that standpoint, but we're here to kind of get them through. And then also on the other side, with regards to just anybody in general, that we have a peer mentor. We have an information specialist. When you get hurt, you get an individual that is talking to you, that's going to help you navigate your situation with your insurance, with everything along those lines. There's no charge for everything. Everything due is free. We'll match up a husband to another husband, a wife to wife, kids to kids. And we kind of put people through. We leave nobody behind. And I had a recent help somebody out last Saturday for the first time. And the wife called me yesterday and she goes, "You guys are on it." It was great to hear that the peer mentors were reaching out to her, the information specialists were reaching out to her, that my coworkers that I work with that are, in the trenches behind me, they're getting these calls as well as I am. And the foundation is here to help, and we're making a difference. And we are a leader, and we're going to lead by example, and we will make sure that if anybody ever needs anything, in that one split second, your life changes. But just realize you can pick up that phone or you can jump online, and there's somebody there to help you. You're not alone.
Well, you guys are making a difference. You, my friend, are making a difference. Alan Brown has been our treasured and valued guest. Keep doing what you do. Thank you for everything. And I really appreciate you spending all this time, Alan.
My pleasure.
For those of you new to the podcast, we got more of these coming along. For Alan Brown, I'm Josh Lewin. Take care. It's the Mr. Irrelevant podcast. Cheers.